You can't live at all unless you can live fully now.
And lives in a world of illusions.
What we do here is go back.
So, I was on a Google Hangout, and a topic came up that I was finally glad I could talk to some random people about. Where someone brought up eternity. And I was like, alright, hold up, before we get into this, I want to know, do you consider anything that we know of now to be eternal? And everybody's like, no. And I'm like, well, so then what about the present moment? I'm like, the present moment is eternal. Everybody in the room was like, no, and just dismissed it. And I'm like, no, that's not eternal, because once it happens, it's over. And I'm like, well, that's kind of the point. You can never pin it down like it's always now. How is that not eternal? It's always now, it's always going to be now, it's always been now. The only way to think of the past or present or future is now. The only time that it can be done is now. Once you go to think about it, talk about it, say anything about it, it's over. Yes, I give you that one. But it's now when it's over. When you're realizing that it's over, it's now. So I don't get how, or I should have gone back in, and next time I do go in, I am going to bring it up again, because I do want to hear people's opinions on it, but it's always now. And I think that's something fundamental that people do not realize or pay attention to or think of, but it is always now. It is never not going to be now, and the future is not real. The future only becomes real in any sense when you're there and it's now. Past only makes sense because you were there, and it was at that point in time, back then, now. The wake does not drive the ship. A ship that's sailing through the ocean, you can tell where it's going based off the wake that it leaves behind, but the wake does not form before the ship gets there. It happens all at the same time because it happens now. These group of people that I was speaking with just instantly dismissed it. To me, it was like they dismissed it without giving what I just said a thought. They just heard it and was like, no, it's not, because knee-jerk reaction, the past has already happened, so obviously it's not. It's like, when it happened, it was now. Whenever that was. Whenever anything's going to happen in the future, when it happens, it'll be now. Now is eternal. So to be in the present moment is to be in eternity. When you're in that present moment, there is no you that you're thinking of. You may be thinking of you, but there is no you when you're really in that present moment. When you're in that moment where there is no chance to comment on. It just is. That's eternal. It's always been, always will be. Time thing is a concept. Time is needed for explanations of things and stuff like that, but helps us to keep our, in a sense, our life regulated. But it's a concept. Time is completely made up. We have different time zones. Everybody's getting sunlight 8 minutes late going around this. Our rotation is not the exact number of days that we set up based off 24-hour clocks type thing. That's not how it works. That's why we need these little tweaks and things like that, like leap years and skipping seconds and things like that to try and keep up with what's actually going on, because you can't really label the present moment. You cannot put an actual label on it, on now. Any moment, you can't put the timestamp on that and leave it there and it be correct, because it's there for such a moment in time that is infinitely small, but at the same time infinitely large. It's so incredibly small that you can't exactly label it, but it's always happening. Always. So in that sense, it's incredibly large. I did find that interesting. Instantly dismissed the idea. Just like, I ain't gonna fight with y'all to go on and talk about it, but I will go back and I will talk with them about it. Had headphone issues, I need to get new ones. Enjoy this on the way out. Peace.
Dead animal sniffs it, see if it's whether it's good to eat, and wanders away. But for human beings, it's entirely different. Because we actually spend most of our time and a great deal of our emotional energy living in time which is not here, living in an elsewhere which is not concretely real. So much so that although we may be quite comfortable and happy in our present circumstances, if there is not a guarantee, not a promise of a good time coming tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, we are at once unhappy, even in the midst of pleasure and affluence. And so we develop a kind of chronic anxiety about time. We want to be sure more and more, because of our sensitivity to the feeling of time, we want to be sure more and more that our future is assured. And for this reason, the future becomes of more importance to most human beings than the present. And in this sense, we are hooked, taken in by a maya, because it is of very little use to us to be able to control and plan the future unless we are capable at the same time of living totally in the present. And so, when in civilized societies we spend so much of our time living for the future, we become very much like those celebrated donkeys, you know, that have a carrot fastened on a stick that's tied to the neck, you know, behind here, and it comes over, and there's the carrot dangling in front of them. And they pursue it, but can never reach it. And so in exactly the same way, it's that way with us. My goodness, don't you remember when you went first to school? You went to kindergarten. And in kindergarten, the idea was to push along so that you could get into first grade, and then push along so that you could get into second grade, third grade, and so on, going up and up. And then you went to high school, and this was a great transition in life. And now the pressure is being put on. You must get ahead. You must go up the grades and finally be good enough to get to college. And then when you get to college, you are still going step by step, up to the great moment in which you're ready to go out into the world. And then when you get out into this famous world, comes the struggle for success in profession or business. And again, there seems to be a ladder before you, something for which you're reaching all the time. And then, suddenly, when you're about 40 or 45 years old in the middle of life, you wake up one day and say, huh? I've arrived. And by Jove, I feel pretty much the same as I've always felt. In fact, I'm not so sure that I don't feel a little bit cheated. Because, you see, you were fooled. You were always living for somewhere where you aren't. And while, as I said, it is of tremendous use for us to be able to look ahead in this way and to plan, there is no use planning for a future, which when you get to it and it becomes a present, you won't be there. You'll be living in some other future which hasn't yet arrived. And so in this way, one is never able actually to inherit and enjoy the fruits of one's action. You can't live at all unless you can live fully now. One of the wisest of the sons of Asia, his real name was Gautama, but he was called Buddha because Buddha means the awakened one, the man who woke up. Now, in what sense was he awake? He was awake in the sense that he was completely all here. After all, we say about a person who's nuts, he's not all here. He's not all there. But our whole culture, our whole civilization, insofar as it is involved with time and living only for a future, is nuts. It's not all here. We are not awake. We are not completely alive now. And consequently, we are so hungry and so greedy, because everything seems tasteless. We are living for an abstraction which has not yet come to be, and we don't know what really is.